Everybody to the inaugural meeting of this triennium of the Audit and Risk Committee. A very warm welcome to the new members who haven't been on this committee before. We now understand we're on live stream, and Councillor Brown and Councillor Rotorua Tate are going to join us by Zoom. And if I could remind you and remind myself is to please silence your phones. We're intending to have a break at around 2:30. We've got a big agenda today, so if you could be mindful of that. And of course it's Friday, so I'm sure if you're going away, we have an impetus there to help us along with that as well. Okay, item number one. I invite Councillor Barker to open the meeting with a karakia, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tutawa mai ronga, tutawa mai raro, tutawa mai roto, tutawa mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māoritū, te Māoriora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tāhiki e.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Okay, item 2 on the agenda is apologies. I don't believe we have any.
Apology for lateness for Councillor Brown, he'll be joining shortly on Zoom.
Okay, and right, so, and Councillor Rotorua Tate is also late too. Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Barker and Councillor Kaifong, thank you. Right, declarations of... can I put that to the motion? Those in favour? Against? Okay, passed. Declaration of interest. Are there anybody has any declaration of interest they want to give? No? Okay. I don't believe there are any urgent items brought forward today. No. And is there any minor items that have been raised with the CE and that need to be discussed today? No. Okay. Moving on. Confirmation, point number 5, confirmation of the minutes of the last committee meeting that was held here on the 20th of August 2025. I ask for a mover and a seconder to those for those minutes, and please only the members that were at that committee can do that. Thank you, Councillor Kaifong and Councillor Wang. Cheers. Could I have a mover and a put that to the motion? Those in favour? Thank you. It's carried. Right, number 6, presentations. I don't believe there's any of those. Number 7, staff reports. Right, this is the first report. 7.1, this is we're on page 18. I asked for a mover and a seconder, and the recommendation, the recommendation is that the report of the audit and risk terms of reference in the work program be received. Have a mover? Tapsell and Kaifong. Thank you. Put to the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's passed. Okay. And I invite David Jensen to give an overview of this report, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. So this report covers the proposed terms of reference for the new triennium for this committee. It includes the purpose of the committee, the intended actions that the committee will undertake and the responsibilities, and also includes a work program that the committee is being asked to acknowledge, noting that it is a dynamic work program. The order of specific items may change as circumstances change, but I welcome any comments or questions on either the terms of reference or the proposed work program.
Do we have any comments on the terms of reference or the work program? Excellent. I'd just like to, I assume there isn't any, I'd just like to say thank you to the staff involved for putting this together. There has been quite a bit of time and effort in it. There's actually 5 people that were involved with the terms of reference, so it's been through a number of hands, so hopefully we have a great document. Okay, I recommend now that the Audit and Risk Committee approves and recommends that the Council adopt the proposed Audit and Risk Committee terms of replacing the existing terms of reference that were adopted on the 26th of November 2025, subject to any amendments agreed by the committee. And there's no amendments that need to be done there. And secondly, that the committee notes the proposed Audit and Risk Work Programme. So can I have a mover and a seconder for that one? Councillor Wing and Mayor Deputy Kaifong, Councillor Kaifong. And I put that to motion. Those in favour? Against? Okay. Okay, moving on. Section 7.2, which is on page 22 of the agenda. I ask for a mover and a seconder to the recommendation that the external review of operational contracts be received. Councillor Barker and Deputy Mayor Kaifong. Right, and I invite David and Tracy and Tony. Tracy and Tony are both from Becca to give an overview and speak to the report that's in the document, plus there's also a presentation. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, can I first welcome Tracy Plain and Tony Anderson to the Chambers. They have worked on this particular item of assurance with various members of the RLC staff. Through the last training, we took an undertaking that we would do a review into the way that our operational contracts were being managed and administered through the organisation. Becca were engaged to undertake that piece of work, and I will invite them shortly to describe the methodology and I guess the findings and recommendations of that report, and we'll take questions at the end of Tony and Tracy's presentation.
All right, kia ora koutou. I'm Tracy, obviously, and this is Tony. And we'll just take you through a few slides and then there'll be some questions at the end. And I'm going to present the slides, but Tony is also on hand to answer the questions. So our overall assessment of after undertaking the major contracts review is that, generally speaking, there's a lot of strong relationships with the contract managers. So things, I wouldn't say, we didn't really find any major red flags. So it's pretty standard in terms of what you'd find with councils across the country. But there are some inconsistencies. So looking to how you might implement better contract management practices, how you might identify performance and value from your contracts and make that more visible, and also just looking at some improvements across process capability and people. And so we've developed some recommendations and an action plan, which I understand is already underway in terms of those actions. So David's already outlined the purpose of the review, but just to reiterate that we looked at 8 major contracts. The key for that was looking at the strengths and areas for improvement in terms of contract management. We were to highlight compliance gaps, inefficiencies, risks, and improvement opportunities, and provide some recommendations. We've been seeing this as a health check or an assurance process, so just trying to look at what would be best practice and how you're performing against that. In terms of our methodology, we started off by looking at the 8 major contracts themselves, the actual documents, and what you might normally use in terms of those contracts, in terms of best practice. We undertook some engagement with both internal staff and with some of the external contractors, which was really interesting, and we developed a draft report which had some comments from staff, and then we closed with, this is basically the closeout, recommending and providing the action plan. So some insights from the interviews. The relationships between contract managers and the contractors are generally constructive. There is quite a lot of communication between your contract managers and the contractors. There's regular meetings in place. There's really accessible, accessible by email, by phone. So there is quite strong relationships there. So that was really good. Sometimes we found there was some informal workarounds in terms of, without having a consistent approach to contract management, if something came up and they weren't quite sure what to do, they would just work it out, which is good, I guess, but there's probably some room to provide some consistency there. Manual reporting is really common, and probably just that limited role clarity, not really a clear contract manager role in the organisation, no centralised contract management function or training, and sometimes lack of succession planning, over-reliance on some of your key people in the organisation. The contractors found sometimes council staff can be slow in terms of decision making, or they'll raise an issue and you can be a bit slow to respond to that, and also that they'd like more visibility over upcoming budgets. So that was just some feedback from them. I've talked a bit about this already, but overall, working well, good relationships, regular communication channels. There are performance reviews happening for most of the contracts through some sort of governance review, quarterly review, that type of thing, or annual review, which is really good. Most contracts have KPIs, and we found that where the technical teams had been involved in the procurement process and helped define the standards and the conditions of the contract, that was where you were having really good outcomes. So strong relationships between procurement and the technical teams was really important. And where some improvement is needed, it'd be really great to see some centralisation of contract management in terms of where it's owned, and some training, and that we've recommended a community of practice for contract managers across the organisation to get some consistency. And similar, related to that, is the role clarity. So what is the role of a contract manager? Because usually it's an add-on to their job at the moment, and so just providing some clarity around what that looks like for those people who do pick up those contract manager roles. There's limited standardisation across templates, guidance, tools, so that seems like an opportunity. And we found an over-reliance on Tier 3 managers managing the contracts, and the thing with that is Tier 3 managers probably have a critical role in the contract, but not necessarily managing the contract themselves, because they should be a quality assurance point and somebody that they check in, or an escalation point for the contract. So that's not ideal probably that's happening, but I have seen already that there's been some change there and some succession planning there. And the contract life cycle is not consistently managed. That's just back to that consistency point, and possibly some improvements could be made with performance data across the contracts. So we've identified those issues. What are the solutions for change? So establish contract management as a recognised capability, improve performance and KPI visibility, separate delivery, assurance and governance roles, as I mentioned, so make sure that those roles are really clear, and formalise the contract life cycle from procurement through to closeout. So we're dropping down to an individual contract level across the 8 contracts. The most of them are appropriate and operating as intended, so hopefully that gives you some reassurance. There were no, as I said at the beginning, no major red flags. Things are generally operating okay. There's just some room for improvement. And so, yeah, what we found, good outcomes where the technical teams were involved early, KPIs were clearly identified, and there was clear governance structures in place where you could undertake those contract reviews. I won't talk about these contracts in too much detail because the detail's in the report, but what I want to say about these 2 contracts is that the recommendations that we have made would have made a difference in the management of these 2 contracts, or they will make a difference. So we've tried to focus on recommendations that would manage these situations going forward. So that's all I'll say about those 2 contracts for now. And in terms of our recommendations, we have 13 recommendations categorised into these 4 headings: capability and ownership, governance and role clarity, systems and performance visibility, and lifecycle management. We've identified some early wins, and I understand some of these things are already underway, if not all. And so establishing a contract management community of practice, which I've already mentioned, map and formalise the contract life cycle and what that looks like for Rotorua Lakes Council, improve handover from procurement after the contract inception, and obviously having those technical teams involved in that procurement and helping to define the conditions, as I've already mentioned as well. Centralise contract documentation, so that was interesting, even just at the beginning of the project, trying to track down the contracts, and so they weren't saved in one central place, and that's probably quite a quick one that could happen there, and address the equivalent contractual risk, which was addressed on the last slide. We've also outlined some medium and longer term actions and tried to identify basically from our assessment, what we thought the cost and the benefit would be, so just to help with prioritisation in terms of what you do first, and provided a horizon, delivery timeframe. Yeah, so just to conclude, I think generally speaking, the majority of contracts are well managed. Contract management is a bit inconsistent, and so there's some room for improvement there. I think you're already aware of the key risks, to be honest, so that there wasn't anything new that came through our review. But our recommendations will improve consistency, transparency, strengthen value for money, and reduce organisational risk. And that's our presentation.
Right, thank you very much, Tracy. Is there any questions that anyone has for? Yep, thank you, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, team, for your report. Most helpful. I've just gone through the detailed version in our Stellar as well, just to look at the 13 recommendations that you made. And I noticed that a couple of the high impact, high benefit recommendations you say have probably already been taken up already, but I'd just like to bounce down to one of the lower ones with a high impact, and that is the designation of a dedicated commercial role that oversees contract management. Can you just elaborate a little bit why that would be, you see that as being high benefit to our organisation, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, if you had that person, they would probably be the one who would have undertaken the review. I mean, you potentially might still want an independent view, but it was just our view that if you had that person on staff, some of the challenges or inconsistencies that you were seeing wouldn't be taking place. I'll let David speak to that as well.
Through the Chair, just to add, a lot of the recommendations are linked. So if we refer to the earlier slide around the reliance on Tier 3 managers, often the management of a contract is the responsibility of a third-tier manager alongside the delivery of the. So that ideally you would separate them to introduce a bit of tension. That it's hard to maintain a relationship and really drive the maximum value out of a contract if you're trying to wear both hats. That's one reason for the recommendation of recommendation 1 around the community of practice. So we do have some very experienced, very well run contracts with long-standing staff members, and there's some other areas where people may be new. If we have that community of practice, that can be shared and can overcome some of those challenges around the over-reliance on specific Tier 3 managers. So a lot of those recommendations are linked, but we will be reporting on progress as we implement these in future audit and risk committee meetings.
Thank you. And assuming, another question just to follow up, assuming that you look at this type of intervention, there will be some extra funding required, so that may be a long-term plan sort of discussion potentially? Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you, Tracy, for your report. I'm just looking at page 4 or 5 of the presentation, the slide, under consistent themes from internal and external interviews. At the bottom it says, contractors note slow decision-making and limited budget visibility. Can you elaborate as to what they were trying to get across there, please?
I'm happy to take that. Thank you for the question. What they were trying to tell us was their ability to deliver more effectively, therefore probably better value for money, and more consistently would be improved if they just had that further view, because then they can resource more accurately and they will then have a better view to how they can respond. So the greater visibility, the greater their ability to respond more accurately and correctly.
Thank you. I think, so when it comes to budget visibility, they're not trying to find out how much we've got in the kitty to play with.
Through the Chair, that particular piece of feedback is not unique to, it's in our organisation. It's quite consistent around councils, especially where we are linking into a long-term plan process. Often we look at an annual plan and have a one-year view, potentially referring contractors to the possibility of a future process where we can look at a 10-year view through a long-term plan. Look, there are some areas, obviously, where we can turn decisions around more quickly, but without oversharing in terms of commercial commercial tension and oversharing our budgets to overplay our hand. We are working within some relatively defined planning processes as well between annual plans and long-term plans, so it's not an unfamiliar criticism.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you. Look, thank you very much for this report. I think this is a fantastic example of, even if at times we think we're doing well, it's important to actually do a slightly deeper dive and ensure that we're all on track, in particular with the financial challenges that both council and our community find themselves in now. So with that context, the question that I have is, how do we prioritise fixing what we already have with the additional challenge or financial burden of implementing any of the solutions that you've provided, such as additional staff that also could come at significant costs. So I totally appreciate that the more resource we put into running efficiently, the greater value that we will have, and I have no doubt it would pay for itself in the end, but we just are so restricted with what we're doing now. So the only concern I did have was some of your description around the inconsistent delivery of the contract management across the organisation, and that there are no policies or templates or formal structure. Those sorts of things we can put in place with existing resource, but it would be very difficult for us to, I suppose, start establishing new roles. How do we balance being able to do that?
Through the Chair, a number of the recommendations in that list are already entrained through existing budgets. So, for example, we have introduced a new module within One Council specifically to manage our contracts, so a one-stop shop for all the information that Tracy described as being hard to locate is all centrally located. We have we are able to use that to generate new policies and processes. Communities of practice we can establish within existing budgets. So there are a number of items in that list that we can address immediately and within existing budgets. Where there is an additional resource request, we will, bring to a future audit and risk committee with a view to get it for a steer on prioritisation through the next long-term plan.
And through the Chair, just to add, in that action plan, that was why we'd tried to identify the cost and the impact, basically, so that you might want to, if you want to tick off those lower cost things or things that can be done in-house, that was the intention. So.
Sorry, and just to finish off that train of thought, would really appreciate as well if you have any examples or templates that could be shared from us of the councils that are working really well in terms of their contract management that we can have a discussion with. Just really want to acknowledge once again that this is an opportunity for us to step up our game even more as a council. I do have great confidence in the people that have, in our staff that have been managing these contracts. We've got a lot of projects that have been successfully delivered, and we look forward to that being improved even further. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a subsequent question popped into my head. During the interviews that you were conducting with our suppliers and contractors, did you get any sort of feedback along the tender process at all? Were there any concerns raised about the way we handle that?
Through the Chair, nothing specific. They understand that central local government of New Zealand has procurement rules and processes that need to be followed, and they are used to that scenario. So no, there was no specific feedback about the tender process.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, I've just got one. I think Tracy answered it before. I wanted to know if these recommendations are all interdependent. By the sounds of things, I think you answered it. The last question, you can pick and choose. Am I hearing that correctly? I ask this because management are going to bring us a paper next time and they're going to tell us what they're going to do, and I'm just wondering how it's all going to work.
Yeah, I think as David mentioned, they are interconnected, but I mean the idea of representing the action plan in that way was so you could pick which ones that suited you at this stage. So I think that there's also a time horizon, so there's the ones that are the short wins, the short term, so I think those are the ones that are in train at the moment.
Yep.
And then there's ones that are a bit longer term, obviously might need additional funding, that type of thing, so those are the ones you'll need to consider through your long-term plan.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one last question, probably for David. I noticed in reading this report that it wasn't a legal review. I'm not sure where that all fits in, but I'm very wary of contracts and the liability clauses in contracts, and especially how they interact with insurance. I've just had a previous experience with all of this, so I just wondered, we've got that in hand somewhere. I just want to get some comfort around that.
Through the Chair, one stage of the process was to assess the risk around, the legal risk around each contract, and there were a number that a further legal review would be undertaken because some of the more historic contracts may be non-standard, and that will be brought to a future Audit and Risk Committee.
Okay, so liability causes are really important, so you're onto it. That's great to hear. Okay. Oh, so we've got one more question. Beg your pardon, Councillor Lee. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Just to double check I heard correctly, David, the implementation that you've done in one council, that was in relation to recommendation 13, the dashboard system to allow performance for the contract to be monitored, key metrics, status risk. Is that what you were talking about?
Through the Chair, an aspect of the One Council Contracts module is recommendation number 4 that has the central document repository for contracts. It has elements of number 7 with the contracts policies and guidance, and we will be using it to inform number 13, but that will probably require a little more time and investment to get to fully implement that recommendation.
Mm. I have to say it sounds really positive for one council that you've managed to do that already, so that's pretty cool. Thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions? Are we done? Yes? You want to say something, Andrew?
Just as a final comment, and don't want to drag it too long because it's Friday afternoon, but thank you to the Becker team. And can I just say one of the things that I really appreciated reading in this report was the willingness and the attitude of our staff and our contractors to participate in a continuous improvement process. We're often in a position, we're in the public eye, and it can be tempting to pretend that we're doing everything right, but I'm really encouraged by the interactions that you've had, the willingness from staff to understand what we're doing well and what we can improve, and I think that's a good sign for me in terms of leading this organisation, that we've got the right culture around continuous improvement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Tony, for your report. I think it was really well balanced, and it was good to see some positive comments come through as well as areas we can improve, so thank you very much for that. Right, next item on the agenda is the Treasury update. Then I ask for a mover and a seconder that the Treasury update report for March 26 be received. Councillor Lee, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Kai-Tong, thank you. What do I have to do? Right, what have we got here? And I invite David and Alex to... Oh, sorry, I needed to put it to a vote. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Oh, I've already had that. And we all agree? Say aye. Yep. Thank you. Okay, I invite now David and Alex, Alex Wonder-Gem from PwC to speak to the presentation and both and to David to talk to his report.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, can I introduce to the committee Alex Wonder-Gem, who is a director at PwC and our external Treasury advisor. We meet, for those of you who haven't sat on previous audit and risk committees, we meet on a monthly basis to understand where our Treasury risks are, to plan ahead for where we know we will need funding or we will need to make changes to our Treasury settings. And is a very valued member of our risk setting when it comes to Treasury. So, if I can firstly address the report before I hand over to Alex to present, you'll see in the introduction our LGFA covenants compared to our policy limits. You'll see there that our debt to revenue for the period was 235%. We have a soft limit as an organisation of 250%. The LGFA will let us go to 280. So we maintain a gap between what we allow ourselves to borrow and what the LGFA will lend us, just in case there is a natural disaster or anything where we need to draw down on some liquidity. So sitting at 235% there. And we were recently reaffirmed by Fitch at AA-, so 2 steps behind the sovereign, with a stable outlook, so an endorsement of our council and the direction we're heading in. But I'm happy, perhaps I'll hand over to Alex to talk through the presentation, and we can take questions at the end on the report or the presentation. So thanks, Alex.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. So look, I'm going to go through a bit of a presentation here, but I'm actually happy to take questions along the way. So I guess the report's in a few kind of steps and stages outlining the kind of framework around Treasury management and Treasury management best practice, and particularly with a focus and setting on local government. Then also then kind of moving through a little bit around what's going on in the world, a fair amount of kind of volatility in financial markets and how that impacts the management of Treasury risk at Rotorua Lakes Council, and then just a bit of an overview in terms of where the current Treasury positions are, and some thoughts and recommendations that we're discussing actively at the moment with David and the team there as well. So I expect there might be some questions around what's going on in the world as well. I'm not sure if I'm going to have all the answers, but happy to give you my thoughts and views on some of those things as well. So hopefully my clicker works here, and I can pass things through. Perfect. So it's kind of a backdrop and a bit of background in terms of the Treasury policy in its totality, which you'd see as a combined document between your liability management and investment management policy, that is governed by a few kind of key areas, in particular around the Local Government Act. So called out a couple of specific sections here, and won't read through these verbatim, but certainly what they are supporting is long-term intergenerational stewardship, prudent financial management, balanced budget settings, things that I think you're probably pretty well aware of, but these are some of the kind of guiding principles around kind of setting the risk controls and limits that you do have in place around your Treasury management. So when David and the team are taking forward recommendations and thinking through actions to take, it is in this kind of background and context in which they do so. And very clear also that you have plans and budgets and forecasts to deliver to as well. So Treasury very much is around a risk management activity, and is around kind of setting and delivering to those forecasts that you do have as well. there's a number of kind of objectives of Treasury management, but in particular it is around kind of delivering to those planned outcomes and minimising and mitigating those the unexpected variances, and particularly the unexpected negative variances. All very well and good if interest rates moved a very good deal low and you participated in it. Not so great if it goes the other direction. So obviously needing to make sure that there's a balance between some participation in favourable movements and ability to take that benefit, but likewise making sure that there's some stability and delivery and certainty that's undertaken as well. The Treasury management policy covers a number of different areas around your financial risk management, so it does have the delegated authorities and the limits sets within that. Primarily what we're often focusing on is around your liquidity and debt management. So the debt management being the physical borrowing, which is typically through the local government funding agency. So local government funding agency sort of remains your lowest cost source of financing, most accessible, longest tenor, most flexible, kind of ticks pretty well every box. So that is primarily your main funding vehicle. You do maintain committed bank facilities as well. So there is a facility with the BNZ that you have an ability to utilise should you so need. The other key topic that we're often discussing is around interest rate risk management. So this separates the physical borrowing from the decision whether that borrowing is borrowed on a fixed or a floating interest rate basis. So much like you do with your own home mortgage or home loan, where you've made the decision you want to buy a house and you're going to borrow the loan for 30 years, and then you make an election around fixing the terms of that loan for 2 to 5 years typically. Typically in New Zealand it's 2 year. 2 year interest rate is quite a hot topic. And then there is some short-term management of cash from time to time, and then obviously the operational risk management and the counterparty exposures, so making sure there's not kind of too much operational reliance on any one particular counterparty as well. So maybe I'll just move through and try to explain a little bit of what's going on in the world, and I say try because it is difficult. Things have been looking better. And some of these pictures and graphs aren't going to tell the full story because the story's changed a little bit recently, as I think most of us are pretty well aware. So business confidence was on the up, consumer confidence was following suit, and typically those two move in tandem. So if my employer feels good, I should probably feel pretty good about that as well. It likely is going to flow through down to me, where I hope it does. The kind of retail sales is around consumer spending. So in New Zealand economy, domestic gross domestic product is roughly 70% consumer spending. So where those kind of retail sales are moving higher, that tends to be a kind of strong lead indicator for growth in the economy. And then the new dwellings consents, why is that in there? It's because everyone in New Zealand fancies himself a property developer in some format. So to the extent that we're seeing the property market progressing and moving forward, that tends to give people the warm fuzzies, and that again kind of helps with sentiment and the economy moving forward as well. So things were looking pretty good, or at least kind of moving in the right direction. We had seen obviously a fairly big and material change in the level of employment, or rather well, there's one of the same, two sides of the same coin, unemployment over the past 3 or 4 years. It did feel like it was peaking, and hoping, touch wood, that still remains the case. But certainly that kind of elevated level of unemployment looked like we were at the top end of that. The mix of some of that employment does kind of vary and change by sector as well, and by kind of locale across the country. Youth unemployment is particularly elevated as well, which is probably not a great thing to be focusing on, particularly when we think about some of the long-term macro themes and trends there around superannuation and the younger cohort of the workforce needing to carry a much heavier burden for a longer period of time. But that's kind of in the past, a lot of that, because the landscape's changed, and trying to bring it together sort of in one page-ish. So there's a bit on here, so I'll try to kind of keep this at a reasonably sort of high level. So The war in Iran at the moment is creating obviously some fairly significant influences, and I know driving down and looking at all the petrol prices on the way down, they're actually probably a bit better here than they are in Auckland, but still they're not great. And I did see one of the signs that had kind of crossed out and said free coffee when you fill up over $200 tank. So that probably is a bit telling as well in terms of where some of those prices are going and what the direct or first round impacts are. So clearly the direct effects, the first round impacts, fuel prices a good deal higher, but then it's the other pieces around the indirect, and I think we're starting to hear and see some of these, and I'm sure you're acutely aware of that around the conversation you probably just had around major contracts and some of the components to that. The materials, the PVC piping, some of the other kind of refined products, and the things like bitumen there, which again is probably relevant to some of the contracts that you've got in place. Fertiliser cost and accessibility, that's certainly going to be a big one for New Zealand, given our horticulture and agriculture industry and the reliance we do have on those. And then those all flow through in terms of impacts on transport, food, construction, manufacturing services. Everyone, not great. And then it's a kind of second round impacts as well, so on the businesses and consumers. So for businesses, it's around wage setting and particularly price setting. So what do I do with my prices? Naturally, the inclination is going to be to set prices higher. That's fine as long as my consumer can meet that price or has an ability to pay that higher price, and perhaps they do, but perhaps not everyone does or equally, and so there's an impact on demand as a result. So these are some of the kind of key issues that particularly our Reserve Bank is starting to get increasingly focused on. So they're already a little uncomfortable with the level of inflation in the economy being a little bit hotter and a little bit stronger than where they would have ideally liked it to be. So sitting just above 3% at the moment. They've been targeting for quite some time, forever, a 2% midpoint and haven't managed to achieve that level. Last week they've given a pretty strong direction of future travel, being concerned that if the OCR stays where it is, which is currently 2.25%, they will not reach that 2% midpoint inflation target. So they've strongly signalled to the market a change, that they are likely to raise interest rates over coming months in order to fulfil their key mandate, which is to try to support inflation at around 2% over the medium term. The trouble and challenge with that is the Reserve Bank of New Zealand does not control the price of oil, and changing the OCR will not change the price of oil. This is a fairly blunt instrument to try to take some action in terms of taking inflation out of the economy and take some heat out of the economy. Unfortunately, that's pretty well the kind of main tool that they have to do so, and so they need to do something. And if they think that the current setting at 2.25 is not going to help support or achieve that objective of reaching a 2% level overall, they must raise rates essentially. And that's pretty well what they communicated to the market. But it is a bit of a pivot from where they were in the second half of last year, which was increasingly concerned about the state of the national economy and looking to provide some support with stimulus coming through in the form of lower interest rates, which comes through primarily in terms of lowered home mortgage rates and people refixing and resetting on lower levels and having a greater level of disposable income. So here's where inflation is. It's come down clearly from the peak that we had post-COVID, but it's got pretty sticky at an elevated level. And the problem with getting sticky at an elevated level is it gets embedded and baked into people's expectations. And they start thinking a 3%, a 4% price increase every single year is normal. That's problematic on a cumulative basis if that happens year after year after year. So 2% is still the ideal target, and we're not there at the moment. The Reserve Bank also getting concerned that having our current interest rate setting so low and materially lower than a number of other global counterparts is weakening the New Zealand dollar. And what that does is reduces our buying power, and so that cost of the new bike David's been looking at overseas is a good deal more expensive, and so we're importing inflation as a result. Hence having a higher interest rate tends to support a higher currency value and diminishes that imported inflation through that direction. So that's sort of an indirect opportunity that they have around controlling inflation as well. Food prices have got a little bit better, but they're still pretty volatile. And you can see again there that yes, they've come off the peak, but sticky around 4%, it's not where anybody really wants to see things be on an ongoing forward-looking basis. So here's how interest rates have moved, and this is when we're starting to get a bit more relevant for, well, what does this actually mean for me and what do I do about it? They've moved quite a way in a short space of time. So in February, the Reserve Bank said, here's where we think the OCR is going to be in the next 12 months, 12-ish months. And you can see there that they pretty well said, we'll hike rates once over the next 12 months. The current market is implying that in the next 12 months, they'll actually hike rates more like 4 times, closer to 4 times. So sort of 100 basis points or 1% increase in the next 12 months. And that's a pretty aggressive pace of change in a benchmark rate in a short space of time as a result of one event a few weeks ago. But that's the world we're living in. So we've moved a good deal higher kind of across the interest rate curve. And so when I say the interest rate curve, this is essentially the different kind of periods of time that you could be electing to fix your borrowing at. So you've got an ability to fix it a great deal longer than a traditional homeowner does with their home mortgage. And you can be easily fixing your interest rate settings out to 10 years. That's not part of our recommendation, and we think you're paying a healthy premium to do so at the moment, but you have that ability to do so. The other side of the coin here as well is where you're sourcing your funding from, which I mentioned earlier is primarily through the local government funding agency, the LGFA. And what you can see there, and again, lots of lines and they're all sorts of different colours, a bit of a rainbow, but if you just kind of focus on the far right and you can see a sharp movement higher, that's reflecting increased credit risk. So essentially, global investors are saying things are inherently a bit more shaky out there right now. If you'd like me to be a buyer of LGFA bonds, I need a greater premium than what I did previously. There's a greater or heightened risk of default, or that I'm not going to get paid my coupon, or I'm not going to get paid my principal on maturity. Put that into context though as well. This is a pretty small move. So if I can kind of extrapolate, and if my eyesight's good enough, at the very longest dated borrowing tenor the LGFA provides, which is in April 2037, so say 11 years, you've had a 20 basis point movement, so call it 0.2% movement higher as a result, whereas the wholesale interest rates, where's the expected OCR floating rate moving, in the last 6 months that's moved 1% higher, so sort of a 5 times kind of magnitude. And again, that kind of base rate is still by far and away your dominant cost in terms of total borrowing cost. The wholesale rate, if the floating rate is expected to be in the next 12 months around 3%, you can borrow for 11 years here at a margin of 1.2% over that. So it's roughly kind of 2/3, 1/3 split. So the focus a lot on the conversations that David, I and the team are having is around your fixed floating balance and mix. That's the kind of primary risk we're managing, particularly because the LGFA, even if their margins are moving higher, are still the best source of capital and financing for you. So you're still going to be accessing the LGFA. And if LGFA's margins are moving higher, you can certainly expect that any alternatives are moving higher still. The LGFA has that credit rating of AA+, so equivalent to the sovereign. So what does that mean for you and where your kind of current position's sitting? So this is a probably slightly different kind of presentation of your treasury risk position than that David might have presented earlier, but it'll tell a similar story, which is you're currently compliant across all your funding and interest rate risk control limits, your counterparty limits, you have sufficient liquidity headroom, so that's the access to immediate kind of facilities or drawdowns or borrowings if you should need it, i.e. natural disaster, I need quick and ready access, you have that access. But you can also see there that there's a fairly significant amount of borrowing in general, so hence this is something we're thinking about pretty closely. You do have a good spread of those funding maturities as well, so you don't have any particularly lumpy concentrations in any one particular year, and you have borrowings that are spread out over an 8-year time horizon. It is fair to say that it is a little shorter term right now in terms of some of those concentrations than where it has been over recent years. That has been a somewhat deliberate strategy with a carve-out of waters-related debts likely to be on the table, and so providing kind of flexibility for some of that transfer of existing balance sheet debt that's on council's balance sheet to a water services entity as well. There's some changes to the way that LGFA are thinking about how that can function now, and they're allowing a novation, which is essentially a cross out your name, put the water services entity's name on the contract. That's a recent development. But it does mean that, in general, the skew is probably a little bit shorter term than what it might otherwise have been, but still reasonably kind of weighted towards even kind of staggered concentrations as well. Your level of interest rate fixing is sort of the top right chart, and the aim there essentially is to have a balance between some fixed and some floating. And you've got a reasonably high proportion of fixing at the moment, so you're roughly, I think it's 80% fixed, I think, in the near term, meaning you've got 20% participation in the floating rate, and conversely that's also the exposure. The floating rate is the one that's going to move, and that's the one that's going to impact your interest cost. You're reasonably well protected going out over the next 2, 3, 4 years, but it does start diminishing in terms of the level of fixed interest rates you do have versus the level and proportion of floating interest rate exposure you do have. And that's a focus for us in terms of what to do about that. And our primary kind of recommendation here is around kind of using flexible tools, and one of those that we are keenly discussing is around the use of interest rate swaps and hedging. So swapping your current floating rate exposure for a fixed rate exposure and creating that certainty. But that does need to come in the background around what is it that we're trying to manage on a forward-looking basis. It's to a forward-looking debt forecast. So having confidence in what that debt level is that we're trying to forward manage to is important as well. So your policy does look to try to take an understanding that future forecasting is imperfect and is not going to be 100% correct. And therefore, over time, your ability to make a long-term decision under your policy does diminish and decline. So you have a lesser ability to select a future dated level of fixing than you do today. You've got greater confidence and certainty in what your debt number is today than you do in 5 years, say. But likewise, you're probably not repaying all your debt in the next 10 years. So you're going to be a long-term manager of this debt. That's a core part of Council's capital structure, if you will. And so that is something that we're kind of thinking about here as well. So these are some of the kind of charts and positions that David and I and the team would be discussing, and how we're thinking about strategy and strategy setting to make sure that you're striking the right balance between certainty, participation, and also kind of that forward-looking risk management as well. Probably won't go into the exact strategy detail. That's probably a conversation for David and I, but fair to say that we think there's an opportunity to do something at a current level, but likewise we would target some movements lower to fully execute on the strategy as well. Hopefully when a man in a White House in the US comes to some agreement in the Middle East. I might just pause it there, actually, I reckon. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have some questions of clarification or the like? Mayor Tipsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Look, thank you very much for the presentation, and also touching on the global impacts and what that looks like for us here in New Zealand and certainly our district. Just a question that I have regarding the short-term immediate impact to some of our core services. So you mentioned bitumen, which I'm also very concerned about. We've also heard helium, plastics, and my concern is, although we can do our forward planning, the impact of what's happening overseas, in particular with oil, will impact us right now, and if not over the next year, as our contracts come to fruition on the many essential services that Council provides our community. So how do we balance that in terms of needing to deliver essential services and contracts to our community without having to reduce those significantly because we either can't afford them, or, as an example, if you look at the liquidity, if we had a cyclone in some of our key infrastructure, well, you know, we're only one natural disaster away from being in quite serious trouble, and that goes across the board for any council in the country. What would be your recommendation on focusing on that? Because I certainly have heard you around the looking at hedging and all of that, but yeah, I suppose I'm just wanting some guidance to give us confidence as councillors that we're on the right track.
Through the Chair, I'll add first. So one way we manage that is through the use of contracts. So we, if we look ahead on the major services we deliver, we have contractual rates that mostly do not allow for cost escalation beyond, they don't ordinarily allow contractors to come in just because fuel's increased, they can't come for a contractual escalation, or so a lot of our costs are set through contracts. Where they're not, it will be a decision for council around whether we maintain the level of service and spend more, or we deliver less and keep within budget, and that will be a decision that we'll bring to council for a decision.
I'm a hedging guy, so I'll give the hedging answer to that. You can consider and contemplate a kind of review of those contracts to see where you do have those exposures as well, and you might find on a cumulative basis that it might become a significant enough risk that you do think about how you might manage that and use a financial markets product or instrument to manage it, so such as an oil swap. So it can be hedged and managed in a way that it is a kind of financial market risk that's driving those prices. It's not necessarily perfect, so it's something that we'd have to kind of contemplate and think around what is the quantum, how material is it, how much effort and time needs to go into managing this, and is it going to be a perfect risk or offset? It probably won't be. So the price of a barrel of oil is not the same as the price of a PVC pipe, albeit they're closely correlated. And you might come to some decision that says a 70% hedge on that level of exposure is still worthwhile, and that takes the certainty back in the decision-making back in your hands, where you've got some experienced, capable people who might be able to do that better than, say, your roading contractor, perhaps.
And just the final question, and this is all very complex stuff, far beyond our usual discussions around the table, but you mentioned that there's been quite an aggressive change based on recent events, and thank you also for mentioning the war in Iran, and I've shared this in national discussions we've had. There's a great sense of sadness from many communities that it took a fuel crisis for not only the government but for leaders to actually start to take not only strong stances in public, but also some action against what's been a terrible loss of life overseas. So I just want to acknowledge that. But based on the aggressive change in recent events, does that also require a change to our business as usual and potentially an equally aggressive solution in how we can ensure that we not only are able to continue to deliver the services that we just talked about, thank you for your response, but also manage our council debt profile within that? Because if things start to cost 30 to 40% more, not only will we be delivering less, but we'll potentially be increasing that debt even higher and having even smaller margin on if there are unexpected costs, such as the increasing amount of natural weather events in future. So, very big question. What do you think?
It's a great question, and it's a very fair question, because there's another element to that I didn't actually touch on, but certainly will have a material impact on the way we think and recommend policy settings and treasury management on a go-forward basis, is the impact of rates capping and what that means to your ability to absorb those costs, and particularly interest costs. So if you do get an adverse movement and shock in oil prices, which flows through to inflation, which flows through to interest rate settings, that pushes your interest cost higher, what's your ability to respond to that? In the past, you've had an ability to pass some of that through in terms of amending your rates setting, in terms of what that is, albeit clearly there's an affordability piece to that too. But if that's going to get taken out of your hands in terms of how far they can move, that's going to require a much greater and tighter focus in terms of that interest rate risk control setting, so that you can deliver to your plans and budgets and you don't have the ability to absorb the same level of variance that you may have in the past. And that's going to cut both ways. It's going to give you likely a high degree of certainty, but it's also going to mean that you're going to be far more restricted in terms of participating in any favourable movements. So likewise, if this all gets resolved tomorrow, which Truth Social might tell us it does, then interest rates could quickly move lower, and you might not have an ability to participate in that because of where your risk settings need to be, because of your ability to have a price pass-through mechanism, that you don't participate in that benefit as well. So there are some changes that I think are going to come in terms of the recommendations that we'll have around what your policy settings should look like in a rate-setting environment as well.
Yeah, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, and thank you for the somewhat scary forecasting, and I'm going to carry on in that vein. I've been hearing numerous times now about the prospect of inflation and at the same time decreasing economic growth to the point where it becomes negative growth, and you start getting this happening. If that goes on for 12 months, what's that going to impact? What will that impact be?
That's a very real risk and possibility at the moment. I didn't articulate this well, but certainly the back end of last year, when the Reserve Bank reduced the OCR from 3.5% to 2.25%, where it is today, they put the focus on economic growth and support and stimulus as opposed to inflation. Inflation wasn't where they wanted it to be. It was still above 3%, which is outside their target, but they said, having said all that, we still need to support the economy. They've pivoted, and they were pretty clear about that last week and say, like, as much as that's true and what you've said I think is completely accurate, that growth is going to be severely impacted and diminished as a result of this, they still have one key mandate, which is to put price stability at the forefront and keep that between 1% and 3%, and they will put their hands up and say, it is not our job to support economic stimulus in the country. That is not our key KPI. There's a key KPI of central government and fiscal stimulus and support, where there's of course another tension around revenues and spending and borrowings and debt levels as well. But certainly that is a risk in the economy, that you do continue to see diminished economic activity, which is going to further reduce what people's salary and wages look like, impact the unemployment rate, and then will go directly, to things like rates affordability as well.
Thank you.
Okay,
I guess.
any more questions, because we're getting a little bit short on time. I've just got a few, if that's all right. I noticed in your report, David, and I've mentioned this to you, and in your report, Alex, you have a different measurement using the liquidity ratio. One's at 114 and one's at 124. Kind of like them to be the same. I'm sure there's good reasons why they're different, but it doesn't ring right with me.
Through the Chair, the reason for the gap there is that since there was a reporting gap between the preparation of my report and the establishment of a new committed facility, so there's that's the reason for the gap.
That's fine, so they'll be the same going forward. Okay, so that's one question. The second question I had was, we're doing pre-funding of debt, and I noticed that we have a lot of money sitting with Kiwibank. I assume that's the money being put on deposit. It seems an awful lot of money with one institution. You say that that's compliant, so the policy is saying that we can have 74 million with Kiwibank all by itself. Is that compliant with policy?
Through the Chair, that is correct. This is compliant with policy.
Okay. Just my intuition tells me that if you have that volume of money, you'd want to spread it around 3 institutions. That would be my gut feel of how I'd manage it, but I understand the policy is a policy. So I didn't mention that. And the other question I had very quickly was, on the pre-funding, are we making a turn on that? If you know what I mean by turn, we're making a positive margin.
It's fairly evenly balanced, I think, at the moment, Chair. In terms of the borrowing rate versus the short-term reinvestment rate that you've got, it's fairly evenly balanced. So I don't believe there's a cost to it, okay, but it's not a... In times gone by, there's been a reasonably significant positive carry and margin through that sort of activity. Presently it's fairly flat, so it is still more of a risk management, forward management strategy right now.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Alex, for your report. Thanks, David. I think we're all done now. Thank you. Cheers. Right, the next item on the agenda is item 7.4 on page 27 of your stellar notes. And I ask for a mover and a seconder, and to the motion that the report, Audit New Zealand Management Letter dated 2024-25 annual report be received. Thank you, Mayor Kaifong and Councillor Barker. Thank you. Welcome, Renee and Katerina. Okay, so I invite David also, who's going to talk first, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, can I introduce Renee, who is our new Audit Director and her first appearance before our Audit and Risk Committee. Katerina on my left is the Audit Manager, who is returning after a period working on another council engagement, but very familiar with our council. So this management letter covers the annual report for the year 24-25. It covers a number of recommendations that are in train, but I invite Renee and Katerina to introduce their letter to management, and we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really nice to be here. It's really nice to meet everyone. Renee van Zyl, I'm with the Audit Office. I'm based in Auckland, and I've been with the Audit Office now for 4 years. Maybe just a quick introduction. So in my portfolio, I've got a couple of councils, including in that is Auckland Council. I'm the second director on that audit, looking after the performance reporting side. I also have some Crown entities, Health NZ components, and some CCOs. So I'm really looking forward to building a meaningful relationship with Council, with this committee, and also with management to ensure we are set up for a really efficient and effective audit going forward, and then really quickly moving into the LTP if I look a bit further out, and then the next audit rounds coming ahead of that. And then today on your agenda first, you've got the report to management. The report was issued by your previous appointed auditor, David Walker, and his team. It relates to the 2025 audit. We had a look through those recommendations, and in terms of basic principles, we think those recommendations are reasonable, and we don't see any particular significant issues with those recommendations. From the report, you'll see they are classified between high-risk priorities and medium-risk priorities. As expected for a council, the high-risk priorities mainly relate to PPE matters. So we always encourage management to close out their recommendations as soon as it's practicable, and then just if there's anything we can assist with in terms of going forward in that process, please let us know. We will go through all of them as follow-up as we move through the audit, and we'll report back to you once the audit is complete. So without going into any of those detail, I would like to invite any questions, anything you would like to ask us in terms of that management report.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Chamber, Renee. Number 12, recommendation. The councillors and senior staff include all their interests in declaration form and update the interests register on a regular basis. I asked this question at last week's Te Arawa Vision 2050 committee meeting, which that committee has 5 unelected members who serve on that committee. Are they required to...
A point of order, Mr. Chair. Relevance. We are not talking about another committee. We are very clearly talking about Audit NZ and their report to us.
My question was, are they required to submit a declaration form that shows their interests for an interest register?
A point of order, Mr. Chair. Relevance. I don't think it's appropriate to ask Audit NZ at this stage about anything other than what they've come to talk about, which is the audit plan?
Well, if elected members are required to submit an interests register, then surely it follows that the other members of that committee would be required to as well.
Okay, I'm not sure of the answer to that. I've reverted to Greg to talk to it.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, through you, Chair. So, Councillor Lee, I'm happy to take this conversation outside the chamber as well, but the Local Government Act does not require pecuniary interest forms to be filled out for non-elected members. There is Officer of the Auditor General guidance as well that sets out that, there's obviously Local Authorities Members Interest Act that still applies to those who are non-elected members but are appointments to committees. So there are certain criteria that they would need to follow in order to declare their interests, but the pecuniary interest form itself, I think is what you're referring to, is not a requirement to be filled out by non-elected members.
Thank you.
Cheers. Do we have any other questions? Sorry, Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. It really just goes back down to the day-to-day relationship. And kia ora kataраina, great to see you again. Timeliness is of great importance to both of us, both ways. So just hoping that as you undertake the audit process, if there are any corrections required or further information that you need, if you could please just get back to our team as soon as possible, so that we can also meet your expectations as well. I know there's probably a real level of detail, but certainly from my observation, when we have extended beyond timeframes, our staff have also been put under a lot of pressure to respond to any queries just before it's due back to you. So we will certainly provide access to staff and all information that you require, and we just also equally ask if we could have that reciprocated too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's noted. And I just want to say, I think it's a bit of nerves, but I didn't introduce Katarina McCown. She's been with our office a little bit longer than me, and a great benefit to have her back on this audit and as my right hand going through the process. Thank you.
I'll just, kia ora koutou. I'll just say, and towards your point, we have already started kicking off some of those conversations with management in terms of having that regular dialogue. We have now got regular monthly meetings happening them, so we can iron out a lot of those issues earlier than later, so we avoid those delays at the end of the process.
Are there any further questions? Okay, I have one. Unfortunately, my version of Stella here, I had a few questions and all my comments have dropped off. I'm not sure why. I'm using it on two computers, so that's probably what the trouble is, I suspect. But I do remember one of them, and it relates to fixed asset disposals. Do we have a fixed asset disposal policy? I notice that the auditors don't actually ask that question, so maybe, David, you could comment on that.
Through the Chair, we have within our suite of asset policies, there is guidance around disposal. I think the item there, there have been in previous years, I guess, some gaps in filling out documentation around an approval process for all disposals. Obviously, the testing for whether that has been fixed only happens once a year, so we'll be looking to demonstrate to audit through this upcoming annual report that we can close this matter off.
So we do have a fixed asset disposal policy?
We do now.
We do have. Okay, that's good. And also, there's seem to be quite a lot of audit points here that are quite old. Would I expect to see those all be gone by next year, or what is your plan in clearing all those reports, please?
Through the Chair, so you see in the comments there are a large number where we anticipate they will be closed through the upcoming annual report, where we can demonstrate that the actions have been taken. Without preempting the work of audit, we will be looking to see those cleared as much as possible before the next management letter is issued.
Thank you very much. Okay. No other questions? Brings us to the next item on the agenda, item 7.5 on page 29 of the Stella papers. It's from a mover and the seconder that the report Audit New Zealand Draft 2006 Annual Plan be received. Councillor Barker and Mayor Tapsell, A mover? Can I put that to the motion? Those in favour? Passed. Thank you. And invite David again and Renee and Katrina again to overview the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass straight on to Renee and Katarina to overview their draft audit plan attached there for elected members to review.
Thank you, David. Through the Chair, so our audit plan forms the basis for us to have this discussion with you relating to the upcoming audit. And should there be anything that you feel should be focus areas that we might have missed in the audit plan, we really invite you to let us know about those. I just want to highlight a couple of points in the audit plan. Firstly, the areas of higher risk that you'll find rather in the front of the document. And there's a couple of areas that we've noted for a little bit of higher audit risk, so we'll place a bit more focus on it, and that's the upcoming water and wastewater revaluations. Secondly, there's the fair value assessment of all the remaining PPE, apart from the ones that's being revalued. We also have a bit of a broader category for PPE, which includes things like your capitalizations, the work in progress, possible impairments, and those type of transactions. Then we've got a watching brief over all the local water done well impacts and anything that might impact on the annual report. And then lastly, we've got a standard risk management override of controls risk that we've got standard across all audits that we look at. At this point, we don't expect any issues in any of those areas. So further, we've got a section that just talks about the group. There's two other entities in the group. We've already engaged with those, with the auditors on those audits, just to ensure that we're aligned in terms of risk. We've got the materiality table, and just to give you a bit of a view on that. So for our asset transactions, we're looking at just under 180 million for materiality. And our normal materiality range is just over 5 million. So anything above those that we find in terms of actual misstatements or errors, we will ask management to fix, or to council to fix. Anything below that, we'll still bring that to the committee up to a level of what we feel is trivial. I think it's about 270,000. We don't do any work over that. So we still bring things that we find that's still under materiality. We also have a table just noting the performance measures that we've selected as material. So we audit all of the performance information, but we do place more focus on a couple of performance measures that we feel is more important in terms of council services and also the reader of the report. So there we go in a little bit deeper. And then the other important one is the timetable. It forms part of a bigger section in the audit plan, which talks about expectations, but the timetable is looking at clearing mid of October this year to be in time for the council meeting, which is, I think, on the 21st of October. And to get there, we've already gone through a planning phase. We are at the moment busy with the interim audit phase, so the team is busy working at the moment. We've got a pre-final and a final, so we're coming in the beginning of June and the beginning of July, and then again in September, really early in September to do the final audit. And the aim of all of these visits is to try and bring forward as much work as we can to alleviate pressures later on for both teams. Working like this requires close management or close relationship and working with management because, as you would think, we are quite constantly in their space and asking questions and asking for things. So just wanted to say thank you for management. The way that they're working with us to get this done. Just very quickly, I thought it would be a good time to tell you that I don't know if you've picked up anything in the media yet, but it is coming if you haven't seen it yet. We're also going through a restructure. So for the past number of years, the Auditor General's Office and Audit New Zealand was operated as two different business entities, two separate business entities. So we've just now rolled up together again. So I don't know, you might have noted when I started and introduced myself, I said I'm from the Audit Office. That's going to be our new name. There's going to be a little bit of rebranding, and the whole idea is just around efficiencies, getting things done a bit quicker, better value for money, and so you will be picking up some of these messaging is going to come through the media in the next couple of weeks. I thought I'll give you a bit of a heads up in terms of that. So I've deviated a little bit now from the audit plan. If there's any questions on that, happy to take that.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you very much for the report and through you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question, and please correct me if as I go through this, because I could well be wrong. So, as we ring fence our water infrastructure, the Commerce Commission will then become the auditor of that in the future. Is that correct, or will Audit New Zealand still be involved in auditing that within our entity?
We will still have a role in terms of the auditing. There's a role in terms of the audit report, but also in terms of the long-term plan. A lot of those practicalities are still being worked through. So our sector teams in the background is working with some of the other stakeholders like DIA and ComCom to get through all the practicalities of what it's going to mean in terms of going forward. So there'll definitely be an ongoing relationship from our end.
Okay, that sort of is, I guess, where my question was heading, because I was just wanting to have some sort of certainty that the audit work that you would do now would line up with whatever work would be needed in the future from the ComCom. So there wasn't something, you did this work and you recommended something to us, and then we presented it later on in the future to the Commerce Commission, and they turned around and said, no, that's not exactly what we want. So as long as there's that line up, I guess that satisfies me.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's a really good comment and question. I think across the sector, everybody is worried about that, and it's a valid worry because, as I said, a lot of the practicalities are still being worked through as we go through it. But we're closely in working with all of those stakeholders to make sure that how we go ahead aligns. We don't want to duplicate things or spend time and money where it shouldn't be.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, kia ora. The delays that have happened in the past, one of the reasons we were told was under-resourced. So with the changes that you've had between the two branches, I guess you could say coming together again, have your resources actually increased, or are you still going to be under the same sort of pressures?
Through the chair. So yes, we have increased in terms of staff numbers, but that did not happen in terms of the rolling up of the office. The audit delivery side is pretty much as it was a couple of months ago, but after COVID, there has been quite a bit of staffing increase on our end. We're still a small office if you compare us to the Big Four, and during certain times of the year, the resourcing is tight. But there's enough. So as long as we plan well, as long as we communicate well to make sure that we plan our people, is where we can actually deliver the work. It should be fine and good, and we've got enough in the system.
Thank you.
Peter Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, and my deepest apologies. I do have to ask about the cost. And the fee for this audit process. It is a necessary process, and of course we value the time and effort that's put into it. But I do note that it feels like it's forever increasing the cost of it. So since 2025, we anticipate it will jump up $11,683. I know we're all dealing with increasing costs. I appreciate that. As an organisation, you're trying to find efficiencies as well. But I do just need a question is that what actually determines the cost of it as well, and how do we compare to other councils? Is it because of our capital works program, like our OPEX or capital works is high, or is it based on population? And yeah, we just do hope to see efficiencies in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, cost is, I mean, it's a question across the sector, and it's a very valid question. In terms of the new, so our audit engagements and costings are in a 3-year cycle. So we've just started a new 3-year cycle where we set up the costs for the next 3 years. And how that worked for this round was audit hours stayed the same as the previous, so there wasn't any increase in audit hours. But the rates, which directly translates to salary cost, basically on our end, went up with a 3%. So they are trying to do, or us as an office is trying to keep those increases as low as we possibly can. We are continuously looking at our hours and making sure that our hours are not increasing, keep it as it is, and trying to get us as much efficiencies as we can in our processes. Our audit fee is moderated by a team that sits outside of the audit delivery team. So there was a dedicated team, which in the old OAG, but they'll still be there. They'll just now be part of the audit office, which moderates those hours to make sure that across the sector there's no outliers, and it's all responsibly set in terms of what we need to do. So we've got our auditing standards and the OAG standards, and then some of the compliance matters that we need to do as a minimum. And we're not planning for this council to do anything above what we need to do to get to assurance level. If we need to do anything more, we will definitely have to come through council first to get that approved if there's anything additional, but trying to keep the costs as low as we possibly can.
Any further questions? I've just got one question. We're in receipt in our papers of your bill for the coming year, and I notice in the letter to the Mayor you specifically exclude some of the following, and I'm surprised that you exclude the cost associated with the revaluation of property, plant and equipment, and also the audit of greenhouse gas emissions. Why do you exclude that? When you know it's all coming, can you not price that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The revaluation part of the audit work, we don't scope that in its entirety in that 3-year setting of the fee, because we know some years there will be some more work and some years there will be less work. So we try to set a base fee across the 3 years, and then if there's a lot of revaluation work for specific reasons, we will come and ask for a recovery for that time and have that as a negotiation with management. So that is on the revaluation side. Greenhouse gases for councils generally, including this council, it's not a material performance measure for this council. So we are not doing a tremendous amount of work on that. So for us, in this instance, it will be part of the fee. If we get to a position later on in a couple of years' time where that measure becomes a material measure for councils, which might come, I mean, we don't know at this point, we anticipate that there could be a lot of work behind assuring a measure like that, especially when you start talking about Scope 3 emissions and those type of things. So at the moment, it's not irrelevant for this council. Okay. And for the revaluation, we don't at this point see a major fluctuation in cost, but if there's additional work we need to do, we'll discuss that with management.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, but it would be good if we got a fee that we knew exactly what it was going to cost us at the start and we don't have all these add-ons, so it's just my point of view. Anyway, thank you very much. And I think we'll take a break for 10 minutes now, if that's all right with everybody, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. So that's at 22. Okay, item 7.6, which is on page 31 in your Stella, ask for a mover and a seconder, that the report Health and Safety and Wellbeing Performance for the period 1 December 2025 to 28th of February 2026 be received. Are the mover and a seconder for that? Mayor Tapsell and Councillor Sanford, thank you. And put that to the motion. Say those in favour. Okay. Right, I invite Clint, thank you, Clint and Jesse, to give an overview of the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. This paper presents the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Performance Report for the period 1st of December 2025 and 20th of February 2026. The purpose of this report is to provide you with assurance that the organisation is meeting its obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015 and that our systems for managing health and safety risk are operating as intended. The report outlines key performance indicators, incident trends, critical risks and progress against our health and safety implementation plan and assurance program. Importantly, it confirms that there are no notifiable incidents at council-controlled workplaces during the period, and that contractor-related notifiable incidents were appropriately managed with no enforcement action taken by WorkSafe. This report is presented for receipt and noting and supports elected members in fulfilling their due diligence obligations as officers of the organisation. I will now hand over to Jesse Jarlov, our Health and Safety and Wellbeing Manager, who will take you through several key areas, including assurance activity during the quarter, incident and near-miss trends, critical risk management, and priority improvement programs underway. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Clint, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to draw attention to section 3.1 in the report, the Health and Safety Assurance Program. Our assurance program started in January this year and provides assurance that our risk controls, our health and safety risk controls are in place and working effectively. Under the assurance program, there's 3 audit types: critical risk controls, general safety audits, and contractor monitoring. In the reporting period, we achieved 2 of the 3 audit targets, with partial delivery 30% of the contractor monitoring audits, and that was attributed to the reporting period coinciding with the holiday break and less contractor activity. We intend to meet and exceed the targets in the next reporting period. And 95% of the critical controls that were observed as part of the assurance program were in place and working effectively, with the other 5%, corrective actions applied to the other 5%. Just moving across to near-miss reporting. So near-miss is an unplanned event with the potential for injury or damage, and they enable us to provide proactive health and safety management. Reporting in the period, near-miss reporting period in the period was stable, with the spike you see in figure 2 in September is the result of the two health and safety systems being merged, so the former Infracore system being merged into the main health and safety system, so it's not a result of a behaviour, different change in reporting behaviour. Lag indicators. Thank you. Lag indicators. So we had 3 lost time injuries in the reporting period. These were as a result of manual handling injuries. Note that all of those incidents were investigated and corrective actions applied. We had 0 notifiable incidents in the reporting period and for the past 12 months in relation to council RLC employees. And just taking a look at the 12-month period, the LTIs for the 12-month period, there were 14 LTIs, which equates to a LTIFR, which is a lost time injury frequency of approximately 15 lost time injuries per million hours worked. And I note that 80% of those incidents were as a result of routine physical tasks, so relatively low potential consequence and low injury severity. Just moving on to section 3.3, continuous improvement and our key programs. We're making good progress against our health and safety implementation plan. The plan's been designed so that we focus on the higher risk actions and ones that are foundational to other actions first, and we have completed 6 actions with 10 underway and 4 on target for completion this quarter. And that the remaining 17 that are not started will be included in the next phase of the plan. And just finally, our health and safety critical risks. Last year we undertook an exercise to identify and formalise our health and safety critical risks. And this is undertaken through historical analysis of our injury statistics and a structured risk assessment approach. And those risks are managed through a set of controls that are documented in our operational health and safety risk register, and those controls are embedded in our operating procedures. Currently we have a library of 127 operating procedures, and it's growing as we develop those. So thank you. Questions?
All right, thank you. Was there any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Clint and Jesse. Jesse, just going back to the figure 1 that talks about the health and safety assurance audits. It doesn't say, it says per month, but over what time period was this taken? How many months?
This was over the reporting period, 3 months from 1st of December to 28th of February. However, we didn't start our assurance program until this year, January.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say that because of the reduced contractor activity, is that the contractors not working because they're on holiday, or was it our auditors not working because they're on holiday?
Combination of both, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other point about the near misses, we heard about near misses from our roading team, particularly the gardens. Is that linked to that?
It is. There have been a significant increase in near miss reports through the guarding team. Part of our implementation plan which is due for completion, the action completion due for this quarter, is related to that piece of work around analysis of the garden
risk around them.
Risk around that.
Yeah,
that's right.
So with that work that's being undertaken now, we should expect that will improve because a lot of them are going.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thanks for the report there. Can I ask on something on page 35, the notifiable incidents? In February, someone was identified as a medical event. Are all medical events not sort of notifiable, or are some?
For a personal medical event, those are not notifiable to WorkSafe. So, for example, if it was a heart attack or something, they're not. It's a personal medical event, and it's not reportable through WorkSafe.
Okay.
Tamara Benfield.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. A question regarding the near misses. Are those recorded by the person who had the near miss, or are they recorded by their supervising person? I suppose where I'm trying to get at with that is, are we sort of tracking or have some sort of indication between reported and unreported near misses? Because I know that in some instances, like for example for the roading, if there are sometimes someone might consider something a near miss and someone might not consider it a near miss, is there an auditing process, for lack of a better word, or is it just self-reported, or how does that work for the near misses?
All of our staff have they are self-reported, so all of our staff have access to the health and safety system, and they can self-report through a mobile application or the desktop version or through the desktop. So I'm not sure that's answered your question, but it's all self-reporting.
Councillor, if I may, through to Chair, the culture we're trying to develop is that anyone and everyone is enabled and empowered to notify, report. It all goes into a secure system called Vault, aptly named, and Jesse and his team look across the organisation at those reports. They bring them to us on a monthly basis at the executive team, and we look through it. So we might get multiple people reporting the same incident, and so we clean that up to reflect that it's a single incident, a single near miss, and then from there we go about looking at trends and looking at controls, and a series of work which often feeds into the improvement plan that the team has in place.
And we have seen an increase in the mindset of reporting. So Jesse and his team have done a great job. So that's been good.
Yeah, and I think just to make a comment on that as well, I suppose when I see reporting regarding near misses and there are slight increases, I do wonder if it is an actual increase in instances or if it's just an increase in people and improvement in the culture of reporting near misses. So I think that's where we're sort of trying to go with the question. But thank you for your responses.
And if I can also add, if you look at some of our highest risk activities are very seasonal, and so you'd expect over time to understand that when we're doing lots of gardening, when we're doing lots of mowing, it's not unreasonable that there might be more incidents, more near misses, not incidents because we've got controls in place for that, but near misses because that work is happening. Similarly, roading and our roading contractors, they work seasonally. In the deepest, wettest part of the year, you won't see much roading worked on, or you shouldn't. So we're trying to apply analysis that isn't just, was last month better than this month. We're trying to understand what's happening to our workforce, what's happening, what type of work are they doing, and therefore what underlying trends we can glean from them.
Do we have any further questions? Okay, I've just got one. On section 3.3, we talked about the health and safety assessment work that you'd had done, and you talk about there's implementation of the further 17 recommendations still have yet to be done. It would be quite good to get something maybe in your next report, just to give us a bit of a timeline when you expect to have those done by, and obviously who's going to do them, which I assume it would be you, Jesse, or whoever's going to do them. So if we could bring that next time, that would be great. Maybe that's an action item. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Jesse, and thanks, Clint, for your presentation. We now have a number of recommendations here. I wondered if we could just all read those recommendations rather than me going through them all. Is that okay, Greg, that we do that? And now I ask for a mover for those recommendations, please. And thank you, Councillor Wang and Councillor, who else is going to give me another one? Councillor Mayor Tapsell. Okay, so any discussion on that? No. Okay, I put it to the motion. Those in favour? Thank you, that's passed. Cheers. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 7.7. That's on page 39 of our stellar notes. And I ask for a mover and a seconder to the recommendation that the key accounting estimates and judgments are received. Councillor Tamara Benford and Councillor Deputy Mayor Kaifong. Thank you. Those in favour? Passed. Thank you. Right. Welcome, David and Michelle, who's going to speak to this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report covers some key aspects of the upcoming annual report process, and there's a couple of matters I'd like to draw your attention to, particularly with asset revaluations. So we are required to revalue each of our major asset classes within the 3-year cycle, and you'll see there that this year we will be revaluing our wastewater reticulation, our freshwater reticulation, and our freshwater treatment classes. Combined at the moment, they're worth just over 400 million, and so we'll be working with the team at Becker to revalue those assets. What we must also do is take all those other asset classes that we are not specifically revaluing and just kind of do a test around what their fair value might be using inflation indices. And if any of those other classes, if they show significant movement, we may need to go out and value those as well. And the risk there is around roading. With the oil prices the way they are, that may have an impact on what it would cost us to replace our roading network with the bitumen layer. We'll be working with the team to do that testing around the theoretical value of our roading network, and just raising a risk that if the fair value of our roading network is above a certain limit, we will also need to go out and revalue our roading network alongside those other asset classes, which would be a little problematic with our timeline for the annual report. We're hoping that we can get in below that, and that will, I guess, depend on where oil prices are at the end of March. So we'll keep you briefed on how that transpires. The second thing I'd like to draw your attention to is around the investment in council-controlled organisations. So if you remember when we prepared the last annual report, we had concluded the sale of Infracore back in-house through the net book value. The sale itself and the transfer of assets and people was tested in the last annual report. However, the Infracore Limited company still existed. As previously reported, we're in the process of winding up Infracore Limited, and a part of the annual report will just be testing to make sure that the disposal of any remaining shares in Infracore Limited are properly dealt with, just so that we wind that up once and for all. I'm happy to take questions on anything else in that report.
All right, do we have any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, team. The revaluation of the water assets, will that be helpful for the planned transition if we go down that path to either an in-house business unit or an external CCO?
Through the Chair, most certainly. So we would be, if we were to transfer the assets into a CCO, we would absolutely need the correct value, the transfer value. So the more up to date we have those, the better. It's also critical for our insurance, just making sure that we ensure the correct value just in case there is ever a natural disaster and we need to replace our network. We need to make sure that we understand what it would cost to replace. So that's also another critical reason why we revalue.
Thank you. And subsequent question, you touched on the potential of having to reevaluate our roading network, which is a big part of our transport, I guess you could say, and we've had a couple of discussions regarding if we could take transport and waters out of our rates and keep them separate, then our rates would actually only be like 2%. Will that be helpful to have that information handy if we ever go down that path? We're working at the moment with the proposed legislation as we understand it. So while there is lobbying to include transport, it's not a firm inclusion in the proposed rates capping. Having the best information possible would help that if roading was ever included in any future rates cap legislation. And we'll make sure we have as up-to-date information as possible. Thank you.
If I can add that through you, Mr. Chair, we're talking about policies not legislation yet, but the policy announcement does also indicate that there's a pathway for exceptions, and particularly sector-wide exceptions, and roading might be the sort of incident, the current fuel crisis might be the sort of circumstance that leads to aggravating factors across the sector that surely can't be up to councils to mitigate on their own. As David said, having the data to support that, should that ever be opened as an opportunity in a future regulatory framework, obviously helps. And so the work the team are doing to be much more accurate about asset classes, the value of each of those asset classes, particularly the large ones, is going to help us and set us up well for should that eventuality occur. Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions? I've got a real minor one. The expected credit losses on general debtors and rates debtors. I just had just for curiosity, I was just looking at last year's annual accounts, and I noticed that we provided 2.5 million for debtors for those two items, and the balance was 34 million in total. 14 million of that was rates. It seemed an awful high provision, 2 million, when I know noticed the previous year we did write off 1 million of rates. Just wondered, is there a standard formula that the auditors want us to use, or how does this all work? I'm sure there's a method in the madness, so I just wanted to understand it.
Through the Chair, look, this is a source of debate between us and the auditors. So we usually internally base our experience on, we base our judgments on our experience, and our experience over the last few years is that our overdue rates have decreased significantly. So we almost halved our overdue rates through the last annual report, over the last year, through some credit management practices that we implemented. Our exposure itself is quite small, so I agree it's an issue of debate. The auditors expect a certain standardisation across the country for the sector. We make a provision, but our experience is that any credit losses are very, very small. So we don't have any concerns to the level that we've made the provision, but it's a source of debate with our auditors.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Is there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, guys, for that. And what else do we have to do here? We go on to the next item, number 7.8, computer software impairment, which I understand you guys are going to do that as well. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report computer software asset impairment be received. Councillor Barker and Councillor Deputy Mayor Kaifong. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you.
Okay.
Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thanks. This report is to inform you of an accounting adjustment to be made as part of our preparation for the annual report, specifically relating to the impairment of Council's on-premise ERP system. I'll take this paper as read, but I'd just like to highlight a few key points. Over recent years, Council invested staff time and resources into the development of our One Council on-premise system. This work was purposeful and valuable, and it helped to customise and stabilise, and as well as support integrated service delivery across the organisation during a period of change. However, technology has moved very quickly, and as a result, to ensure that we remain efficient, secure and capable of flexible ways of working, Council made a strategic and permanent decision to move to the One Council cloud-based ERP system. This was successfully implemented in December 2025 and represents a fundamental shift in how we deliver service across the organisation. As part of this shift, though, Council no longer controls or uses the intellectual property associated with the on-premise system. And so from an accounting perspective, this now renders the system, or this legacy system, obsolete. Under the accounting standards, we're required to assess our assets for impairment, So any asset that is no longer providing any service or future service meets the indicators for impairment, and therefore this on-premise solution has now been identified in our process. It is important to emphasise, though, that this is an accounting adjustment. There is no cash outflow and there is no impact on our rates. This is just about ensuring that our balance sheet accurately reflects the assets that we are using. However, because this impairment will be recognised as an expense, it is likely to result in a reported deficit in our annual report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Look, I'd like to just reiterate that although the transaction is a large amount, this is purely a accounting standards transaction. We are still using everything that we paid for. We are still using the customisation and the time and effort put into developing the system. It's the act of moving from on-premise into the cloud requires us to make this impairment to the asset, and it's purely a requirement of accounting standards. But we're happy to take questions on this on this transaction.
Councillor Patterson.
Seems to be me all the time, sorry.
That's right.
Mr. Chair, but this particular one got my interest up. You did ask that we try and find out if there's anything that we didn't pass the sniff test. Not so much the actual accounting side of things. I'm more concerned about the risk involved with being cloud-based. So do we retain data sovereignty with a cloud-based solution, i.e. do we control it locally in-house, or is it controlled somewhere else?
Yeah, I might try and help you out there, David. So this is a curveball to our accountants, a question about data sovereignty. Could I... Oh, okay. Can I take that as an action point for us to come back to? Because I'm pretty confident I can answer that, but I don't want to commit just yet in case I have to impair that advice a little bit later on. Wouldn't want to do that 12 million times, so can we take that as an action?
Thank you. I have a secondary question on that, and it is the accounting one. So my other concern was, yes, I can understand if it's all kosher to move to the cloud. However, I'm concerned that we have a system that actually worked. Why are we not keeping it as a backstop?
Yeah, I'll help you out, David. So that on-premises solution ceased to be supported by the vendor, and it wasn't just for us, it was for all of the purchasers of that product. So that would mean we wouldn't get updates, which would mean that any cybersecurity vulnerabilities that they'd found wouldn't be patched, wouldn't be updated. We wouldn't get any of the automatic improvements that they would roll out at no cost for anyone who was on their latest module. So it just didn't make any sense, both from a security or from a up-to-date product viability perspective, to continue on-premises. Separately, we're actually changing our on-premises infrastructure, so it probably wouldn't be appropriate to continue to host it on-premises anyway. So yes, a number of reasons that it was a transfer, and the transfer we'd negotiated pretty hard in terms of recognising the value we'd put into developing the on-premises solution, and picked up all of those customizations and moved them into the cloud, and we're using them. I was around for the transfer. It happened pretty seamlessly. It was a lot of effort from the team over the weekend, but happened without any issues, and all of the work you're seeing now is being produced through the ERP system that's in the cloud. Sorry, David, you can add to that if you wish.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Tapsell, we have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. It's just a question regarding the timing and this coming to us now. So thank you very much for reassuring us that it doesn't have a financial impact or impact on our rates. But when you look at the history of this, which was did go live in May 2023, we're just wondering if this could have come at any other time. I'm just mindful, there's been such significant work We've pushed our Chief Executive and he's delivered a significant amount of savings in the annual plan we're about to adopt next week. And so I'm sure you would appreciate that it's of great pains that despite it being implemented a while ago, this will now impact what would be our financial position at the end of this year. So, in reporting only. It's, just a question on that timing. And bearing in mind that the whole program commenced in 2017 as well, so we've been on quite a journey as an organisation to be better with our technology and innovation.
Sure, through the chair, the timing of bringing this to the committee is entirely as a result of the vendor's decision not to cease supporting of the on-house solution. So ordinarily, when we bring a piece of software like this in, we depreciate it over 10 years. So we were using this software. There's a portion of it that is still on our books as an asset, but the decision of the vendor to cease supporting and to move us into the cloud has forced us to bring this to the committee. As if it hadn't happened earlier as a signal to the Audit and Risk Committee, it would have appeared anyway through the annual report, as the auditors are aware of the transaction. So this is a necessary decision to bring this to the committee, unfortunately.
Can I just add, just to clarify the timing? So the timing when this change happened was December 2025. It was last year that we made the change, as noted at page 44 at the top paragraph. So 2023 was when the migration to the on-premises solution happened. 2025 last year was the change from on-premises to cloud. And so this is the first opportunity to bring that to Audit and Risk Committee. Just to be clear, we haven't been sitting on it for a couple of years. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I just might help for clarification purposes. I think what you've described is we're moving from software as an asset to software as a service, which is an operational experience instead of an asset, right? Right, okay, thank you. Sounds perfectly kosher and legit to me. Thank you.
Any further questions? Right, well, thanks for bringing it to our attention early on. It's good to have a no surprises approach to these things, particularly at the year end. So we've got that one out of the way. And Councillor Patterson, good question. Be interesting to hear the follow-up on that one. I'm sure it's fine. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to read out the recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee note that the ERP on the on-premises asset impairment of $12,408,351 in this financial year ending 30th of June 2026. Those, can I have a mover? Yeah, Councillor Sanford and Mayor Tapsell, thank you. Those in favour? Passed, thank you. Any discussion? Taken the vote, okay. Next item is item 7.9, Enterprise Risk Management Framework. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report Enterprise Risk Management Framework ERMF be received. Councillor Baxwell and Councillor Sanford, thank you. Put to the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Passed. Invite David and Craig to overview the report, please. Welcome, Craig.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Enterprise Risk Management update. This report addresses where we are, what's working, and what I'm improving. So we'll start with the headlines. We have a solid risk management system, and it is working. What I'm doing is making it clearer, more strategic, and more useful for governance, particularly in supporting the delivery of our LTP and our annual plan. Specifically, the risk environment is stable. There are no residual extreme risks. Controls are operating effectively, and we're moving from a complex, detailed view of risk to something more streamlined, connected, and meaningful. So in short, this is an evolution, not a reset. The risks in our current state are actively managed. We have clear ownership, regular review, and mitigation actions are in place. And importantly, when controls are applied, the majority of risk sits within a medium range and there are no residual extreme risks. This gives this committee the assurance that controls are working and that risks are actively managed, not just recorded. Our exposure is concentrated in service delivery and stakeholder relationships and reputation, which is consistent with the delivery of our services to our community and achieving our long-term plan outcomes. Section 4.2, the direction of travel. What are we looking to improve? The key shift is moving away from listing risks to understanding our enterprise exposure. At the moment, the risks are visible, but not always clearly connected to strategic outcomes or our LTP delivery. So work is underway to consolidate the risks into a smaller number of enterprise-level themes, clarify the distinction between operational enterprise risk, introduce risk tolerances over time to support consistent decision-making, and strengthen the connection between health and safety risk and enterprise risk. So as we strengthen this enterprise view, it's important that we look beyond risk in a narrow operational sense. This means asking not only can we deliver, but also who is most affected if we do not, where are the impacts likely to be uneven, where does trust and partnership matter most, and where does delivery depend on others as well as us. Section 4.3, implications for governance. As elected members, your role is governance and oversight, so this work will give you a clearer view of enterprise-level risks that could impact LTP, visibility of where risks affect community trust, Māori outcomes or vulnerable communities, better insight into where delivery depends on partnerships across the wider council system, early signals where risk is increasing or performance is under pressure, and better support for prioritisation, trade-offs and decision-making. Importantly, I recognise the need for a clear and focused view of the organisation's most significant risks. As part of this work, I will be bringing forward a prioritised top risk view aligned to our enterprise risk themes so that you can clearly see where our highest exposures sit and how they connect to LTP and community outcomes. So in closing, we have a stable and well-managed risk environment. What we're looking to do is strengthen how risks are understood, not only in relation to service delivery and LTP outcomes, but also a wider lens of community, impact, equity, Māori perspective and partnership across the wider council system. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Audit. No questions? Thank you very much, Craig. That's a very comprehensive report that you've got there, and where you're heading, I totally support. It's really exciting, the stuff that you're doing. Really interested to hear, and you and I have had these discussions, that we might see the top 10 risks next time round, and we might see more focus on the strategic risks and the emerging risks, which is what your report talks to. So, excellent, good report. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you. Okay. Next item. Okay, we're on item 8, which is moving into the public excluded area. Do we have the public? Are they all exited now? And I want to advise that there's 2 items for consideration of why we're having this public included session. The items and the reasons are 8.1 confidential minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 20th of August 2025, and the second item 8.2 Rotorua Lakes, our liability claims on progress, which is information in plain English. This information relates to legal matters. Maybe we should. We can't close the door. Is that all right? Yeah. Yep. Recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee resolves to exclude the public on the grounds contained in section 48, subsection 1 of the Local Government Official Information Act, Meeting Act. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Barker and Deputy Mayor Fong as a seconder. Put the motion to admit the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Okay. We all have it. Thank you. Just have a second.